The math says that the Washington Commanders are not likely to draft a franchise quarterback this April, but that does not mean that you should lose hope in what's going on. That and more on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. And don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. And when I go to the Airbnb in Orlando to cover the NFL league meetings this week, you're coming along with me. When I'm in Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine, you're there. And when we are in Ashburn for the NFL draft, you will be in the media room with me via text message. No hashtags, no filters. You don't got to worry about none of that stuff. My stuff is going to come directly to you via text message, and you're going to respond to me directly via text message. That plus you get all kinds of inside access and bonus content. So it's a lot of fun. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders to get in on the insider program today. I'm David Harrison, credentialed member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation, here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And everydayers greatly appreciate your continued support for the show, even as we actually missed an episode at the end of last week. Sorry for that. Travel, technology issues, all kinds of craziness happening as I made my way to Orlando, but we are here and we're back on track for this week. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com/Locked On to get started today. On this episode, we are looking at some of the factors that determine successful and unsuccessful quarterbacks, and we're going to try to identify the likelihood that Washington can get a franchise quarterback in the top 3 of this year's NFL draft. But first, we're going to start off this mailbag with my assertion that the Commanders are just not likely to draft a franchise quarterback in the NFL draft. And that's not my opinion. That's just the math talking. And that's going to be how we start off this mailbag episode. We want to talk about what a franchise quarterback is, how likely the Commanders are to get one here with the number 2 overall pick. But we got to break this down layer by layer, and we start with just simply successful quarterbacks. Bill asks, in previous years, usually 1 out of 3 quarterbacks meets the definition of successful in that their drafting team holds on to them and gives them a big contract after their 5th year. Of the top 3 this year, who is likely of those quarterbacks to succeed? Now, I'm going to take this definition of success a little bit further and basically just say second contract, right? Because Justin Herbert obviously not getting signed after his 5th year, getting re-signed before his 5th year. So just a little bit of a nuance there and a little bit of a nitpicky frame. But basically, if you're talking about what is a successful first-round quarterback, I think that bare minimum, getting a second contract, right? Going beyond your rookie deal, I think is the bare minimum criteria to say you are a successful quarterback. And certainly some people out there will say you need to win a playoff game, you need to have a division title, something like that along the lines. And that's fine. If those are your criteria, perfectly fine. But I think everybody can kind of understand or agree to the bare minimum of you have to get that second contract. So looking at the 59 quarterbacks drafted in the first round in the past 20 years, according to Pro Football Reference StatHead. So that's from 2001 to 2020, the last 20 years, or the last 20 years of potential contracts, right? So 2021, 22, 23 draft classes. I didn't count them because right now they're just kind of frankly not in that window to really have their second contract opportunities. So I don't think it's fair to use that barometer for those quarterbacks. So we're looking back through 20 years, but the 20 years we're looking at 2001 NFL draft to the 2020 NFL draft. And when you look through those classes, you do have a total of 59 quarterbacks. And of those 59 quarterbacks, 27 of them entered second contracts or extensions, however you want to put it, with their NFL teams that drafted them. I kind of have an asterisk here, and I have a 28th quarterback. I am putting Tua Tagovailoa in here. Does not have, at least at the moment of this recording, does not have that new contract, but all the stories are that he will have that new contract sooner rather than later. So I expect the Miami Dolphins to extend him beyond his rookie deal. So I'm putting him in here a little preemptively, but just getting that out of the way and just kind of letting you know that that's part of the criteria here. Another asterisk potentially needed here. I am counting Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers in these categories as successful quarterbacks getting second contracts beyond their rookie deals. I know that Eli Manning, drafted by the Chargers, traded to the Giants. Phillip Rivers, drafted by the Giants, traded to the Chargers. So technically you could say they didn't get a second contract with the team that drafted them, but because of the circumstances surrounding that and the fact that Eli Manning never took a rep for the Chargers, Phillip Rivers never took a rep for the Giants, never took a physical, never took a flight to New York or San Diego as a member of that franchise, I'm going to go ahead and count them in here as successful quarterbacks having deals past their rookie deal. So when you look at these, so again, 59 total quarterbacks in the last 20 NFL drafts, starting with 2001 to 2020. So again, the qualifying, when you hear terms like qualifying quarterbacks, that's who's qualifying here. Is 2001 to 2020 rookies or drafted quarterbacks. 27 or 28 of those guys earned second deals. Some Super Bowl champions in here. Ben Roethlisberger is one of those guys. He actually leads that group with 165 career wins. Aaron Rodgers, a Super Bowl winner, second most wins. Phillip Rivers, the most wins by a non-Super Bowl winning quarterback. He had 134 in his career. Also, Joe Flacco is in there. Matt Stafford is in there. Ryan Tannehill is in there, even though most people wouldn't call him a franchise quarterback. Got a second deal from the Dolphins, so he's considered in that successful group. The fewest wins by a quarterback to get a second contract from their deal that extends past their rookie deal, Jordan Love. And granted, that was a one-year deal, so it only takes him 1 year outside of his rookie structure, but it still kind of qualifies, right? Kyle Bowler is another one, 20 wins. He ended up getting a second contract from the Ravens after they drafted him. So of the 59, you also have 31 unsuccessful. The winningest quarterback of the unsuccessful group, the group that didn't get out of their rookie deals and return under a non-rookie deal. Jay Cutler had a career 74 wins. Jared Goff obviously left the Rams. He ended up with the Lions and is doing some pretty decent stuff there. Now you have some former number one overall picks. Jameis Winston is in that group. Paxton Lynch is the lowest winning quarterback on this list. He only has one career win after being a first-round quarterback. So you have a good spread of successful and unsuccessful quarterbacks in the first round here. Now, 10 of 23 Super Bowls from 2001 to 2023 were won by first-round quarterbacks in these groups. So the chances of a first-round quarterback using these 20 drafts, 2001 to 2020, as a barometer of the chances of a quarterback getting a second contract, 47%. So a little bit under 50%. Chances of getting an unsuccessful quarterback, then 53%, a little bit more than half, right? Chances of drafting a Super Bowl winning quarterback according to this group of study, right? 43%. The chances of a post first round quarterback winning the Super Bowl, 40%. However, 5 of those Super Bowls in the last 20 Super Bowls, or 23 Super Bowls really, have been won by Tom Brady. The other 3, Nick Foles, Russell Wilson, and Drew Brees, those guys won. So if you take out the Tom Brady 5 Super Bowls, that number is a little bit less. So still a higher number of first round quarterbacks winning Super Bowls than anywhere else. So look at some NFL draft quarterback superlatives, right? That was the crux of the really the root of the question was which of these 3 quarterbacks, top 3 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, are least likely to succeed. And here's my kind of take on this, right? I put less ownership on the quarterback succeeding than the team succeeding around the quarterback, right? So I kind of look at it like this, like if we bring a new hire in, right? So if we're a business and we bring this college graduate into our business, is it on that graduate to come into our business and make our business better? Or is it on the business to make that employee better? I kind of look at it the same way. I don't necessarily put it on the quarterback. So because of that, I look at team trends. So most likely to be successful, whatever quarterback lands in Minnesota. The Minnesota Vikings did not trade with the Houston Texans to get another first round pick to simply sit there and get role players. They are actively trying to package the 11th and I think 23rd overall pick that they have in the first round, try to move up. And they might have to move up twice. They might package 11 and 23 to like Atlanta and get number 8, and then try to take 8 and some future picks and try to get to number 3 or number 2 with Washington. So if Minnesota is successful in grabbing a quarterback, I think they actually have the most likely environment to have a successful rookie quarterback, because you kind of look at their history, and Minnesota Vikings certainly have some bad years. Don't want to say that they don't have some bad years, but they kind of seem like an organization just kind of understands what it takes to build a team around the players that they have. I know they have some issues with Justin Jefferson that they got to figure out, but the Minnesota Vikings throughout the years with the quarterbacks, they've been able to be competitive, get competitive, stay competitive, no matter who the quarterback is for the most part. Again, not always perfect. Least likely to be successful, I'm going to put a name on this one and put Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears. Why? The Chicago Bears, they took a first-round swing at Mitchell Trubisky, failed. They took a first-round swing at Justin Fields, failed. When have you really looked at the Chicago Bears history and said, man, you took a young, talented quarterback and really grew your organization around them and really made them thrive? They really haven't done it. So why do we believe they're going to do it now. So until they prove that they can thrive and nurture a young quarterback, I'm not going to give them belief that they can. So Caleb Williams, unfortunately, is the victim of that. But Chicago Bears, I think, most likely to be unsuccessful, or least likely to be successful, most likely to break their franchise trend. I'm going Washington Commanders here. The Washington Commanders have not had a successful quarterback run in forever. God, look out for Terry McLaurin. Why can't this man catch a break? But you look at what the Washington Commanders are doing right now. They're already trying to buck a lot of franchise trends, and I think they're doing it successfully. So I think they have the best chance of breaking those franchise trends. And I think the biggest challenge, New England Patriots, right? It's got to be, you're still trying to replace Tom Brady. Like 2 years removed, Mac Jones, or 4 years removed now, right? 3 or 4 years removed now. Mac Jones didn't work. Bailey Zappi hasn't worked. You brought Jacoby Brissett back. We'll see what happens there. We'll see who they draft at number 3 or if they trade back. Either way, that is a very complicated situation. And Pats fans, not incredibly patient trying to find that new guy. Most likely to win most likely post first round quarterback to win the Super Bowl. And this is kind of a hot take because there's really not a whole lot of substantial evidence behind it until I see what team he lands with. But I'm going to go Michael Pratt out of Tulane. But now we got to turn our focus over to not only can Washington get themselves a successful quarterback, can they land a franchise quarterback? That is where the math gets even more complicated. And that's coming up next on this mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Say goodbye to your busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. This episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. Whether you're betting on a big upset or the number 1 seed, it is time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who is going to win it all at the time of this recording. The UConn men are 250 plus 250 favorites to win the men's tournament. South Carolina women are minus 145 favorites to win it all over there. In fact, they're the only specific team that has any odds. The rest of the field is the only other odds you can get. Of course, at the start of the new league year, we got football odds. The 49ers are still the top favorites to win Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans next year. The Chiefs have plus 650 favorites as the second highest odds. The Commanders still sitting at plus 15,000. We'll see what happens when the quarterback situations change significantly. You can also bet on Super Bowl matchups, Chiefs versus 49ers. Maybe you want to go Commanders versus Chiefs, whatever you want to do. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Bet on college hoops so they cut down the nets. FanDuel is official sports betting partner of the NFL. Continuing on now with today's episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, every dayers. Thanks for continuing to come through like you do. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your television all day? Do you have to turn down the volume when all the shouting begins? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinion, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Locked On Commanders recorded live here in Orlando, Florida. Beautiful Orlando, Florida. Warm Orlando, Florida. Shout out to all my DMV folks who are still dealing with some pretty chilly temperatures. I feel for you. I really do. I miss you, but I'm going to enjoy the sun while I can. My wife and son are actually right out here hanging out in the pool. It's 8:30 at night, and they're hanging out in the pool. That's how you do it out here in Orlando. But we're going to move on with our mailbag episode now. Rex says, how often does a team get a franchise quarterback from the first 3 picks? So we just talked about successful quarterbacks, unsuccessful quarterbacks. It's about a 50-50. It's not exactly 50. It's like 43-57 that you're going to get a successful quarterback in the first round versus an unsuccessful quarterback. And we talked about these superlatives, right? And I think when we look at these numbers, part of the trend we have to see is organizations that are just really good at nurturing, building around, and thriving with a young quarterback versus organizations that, quite frankly, a lot of times they take these young quarterbacks and they just throw them in the deep end and say, okay, go be great and go elevate all of us. Go make us all amazing and beautiful 22-year-old kid, 21-year-old kid, 23-year-old kid who's first now getting into the NFL. And to me, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm really hoping that's not what the Washington Commanders are about to do. Doesn't look like that's what they're about to do. So I think that's why you have a little bit more confidence. But what does the math say? What does the last 20 years of math say about getting a franchise quarterback? And again, when we say the last 20 years of math, we're talking 2001 to 2020, the 21, 22, 23 draft class quarterbacks have not had the opportunity yet to hit their second contract. So we're kind of keeping them out of this for now. So of the 28 successful quarterbacks, and again, we're counting Tua in there right now, being a little bit preemptive there, but I'm confident he's going to get that second deal. Of the 28 successful quarterbacks drafted in the first round from 01 to 2020, 12 of those 12 of those 28 were top 3 picks. 24 total quarterbacks were drafted in the top 3 in the last 20 years. So 12 successful quarterbacks have been drafted in the top 3 in the last 20 years. Again, 01 to 2020. 24 total have been drafted in the top 3. So it's a literal 50-50 split. 12 of them have been successful, including guys like Matt Ryan, Eli Manning, Alex Smith, Matthew Stafford. Not winning Super Bowls necessarily. Matthew Stafford did, but not with his first team. But getting that second contract, sticking with their team a little bit. Even guys like Michael Vick, who I know, his career obviously had that really important break in it. But you also look at guys like Kyler Murray, who were in their second contract. Top 3 picks that were unsuccessful. Again, another 12 of those. Baker Mayfield was one of those guys. And the thing about Baker Mayfield is a lot of people feel like the Browns basically just torpedoed him, basically got incredibly impatient with their own franchise, and basically had a knee-jerk, almost panic move to do that. But at the end of the day, he does end up moving on before the end of his rookie deal. Sam Darnold is one of those. Mitchell Trubisky, there's a Bears quarterback in there. But you kind of look at some of these organizations. The Jets have been a dumpster fire organization for a long time. The Browns are the Browns. The Bears, we talked about. The Lions, I mean, Matthew Stafford was the best thing they had going on for a very long time. They never really put that whole thing together. Jared Goff coming from the Rams. I feel like the Rams basically, instead of not building around their young quarterback, kind of understood now's the time to strike. So that's a little bit of an anomaly there. The Buccaneers, Jameis Winston, the Buccaneers haven't had a rookie quarterback get a second contract. And I don't even remember off the top of my head, but it's been forever. I think they've never had a rookie quarterback get a second contract. Marcus Mariota and the Titans, that's been a rotation of quarterback issues. RG3 in Washington, I don't got to tell you all about Washington. You definitely already know. Sam Bradford is a Ram from before Jared Goff's Ram days. So, I mean, a lot of these franchises, when you look at the franchise that these quarterbacks are attached to, it's really kind of no surprise that these are the quarterbacks that are top 3 picks that are also unsuccessful, which again just goes back into my own take that it's not so much about the quarterback, right? Like if you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, it's because you know he has NFL level talent, right? Talent is not the issue in the NFL. I tell this to a lot of people when you look at like bottoms of NFL rosters, especially, it takes an incredible amount of athletic ability, determination, hard work, and skill to suck in the NFL. Like to be a practice squad member of the NFL, you've got to be an exceptional athlete, very dedicated, incredibly skilled to be a practice squad player. So that's why I don't like when I hear people say, "Oh, that guy sucks." You know what I mean? Like Jake Fromm, third quarterback on the roster. A lot of people say Jake Fromm is trash. Jake Fromm is garbage. Jake Fromm is an NFL quarterback who's been on multiple teams and stuck through multiple coaching changes through NFL teams. That dude does not suck. Now, what that should tell you is how much ability it takes to be a practice squad quarterback, a number 3 quarterback in the NFL, and how much more talent it takes to be a number 1 quarterback, right? So if you're drafting a quarterback, these guys, these scouts, these coaches, if you're drafting a quarterback in the first round, it's not because the dude is devoid of talent. Now, some quarterbacks like Jamarcus Russell, they end up failing because they can't take the success. They can't handle the maturity level of it. That is something, unfortunately, coming from the college game, you can't really evaluate till you get them in the pros, right? So a lot of it has to do with the program they go to. When you look at successful quarterbacks taken in the top 3, again, half of the top 3 quarterbacks taken from 01 to 2020 have been successful. 41% of all successful quarterbacks drafted in that period came in the top 3. So more than or almost half of those guys, 55% of all successful quarterbacks came outside the top 3. So you're actually slightly more likely to find a successful quarterback outside the top 3, according to the math. Now, looking at unsuccessful quarterbacks, again, 50-50 split between the top 3s themselves, but 39% of unsuccessful quarterbacks came in the top 3. 61% of unsuccessful quarterbacks came outside the top 3. So while you're slightly more likely to find a successful quarterback outside the top 3, you're not infinitely, but you're about 10% higher chance of finding an unsuccessful quarterback outside the top 3. Again, to me, that's not so much about the prospect as it is the organization. Now, successful quarterbacks not drafted in the top 3, but drafted in the first round. There's 16 of those guys, so 57% of them came from outside the top 3. And when you look at franchise quarterbacks, who are the franchise quarterbacks that came out of these top 3s? Matt Ryan comes to mind, Eli Manning, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, Joe Burrow, right? But they're not all Super Bowl winners, but certainly franchise caliber quarterbacks that led their franchises for a long time. 29% of top 3 picks from that window became franchise quarterbacks. 12% of all first-round quarterbacks in that time frame have become franchise quarterbacks. Only 4% of their top 3 picks from 2001 to 2020 have won a Super Bowl. 9% of Super Bowls from 2001 to 2023 have been won by a top 3 drafted quarterback. So again, simply drafting the kid top 3 does not guarantee anything. Franchise quarterbacks outside the top 3, there are 16 successful quarterbacks that became franchise quarterbacks outside the top 3 picks: Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, just to name a few. 44% of the non-top 3 quarterbacks picked in that time frame have become franchise quarterbacks, and 19% of them have not, or of 19% of those not top 3 quarterbacks have won Super Bowls. 26% of Super Bowls from 2001 to 2023 have been won by non-top 3 quarterbacks. But again, non-top 3 quarterbacks, these are franchises that are not picking in the top 3 because they tend to be somewhat successful already. You bring a quarterback in there, you elevate him, you elevate everybody. In conclusion, when you take the last 20 years of available data, and again, 2001 to 2020, there's a 41% chance Washington will draft a successful quarterback in the top 3 this year, and just a 29% chance their top 3 quarterback will become a franchise-leading quarterback. Do with those numbers what you will. Let me know about your takes. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the front line unit, specifically how they're graded and what it does to the quarterbacks that they're trying to protect. That's coming up next on this mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wrapping up today's mailbag episode of Locked On Commanders. Final question for the episode. When I'm looking at PFF numbers, I tend to think of them like grades in school. So 90 grades are A's, 80 grades are B's, 70s are C's, 60s are D, below that is an F. But since no one gets 100, which is facts, nobody gets 100, it looks more like 80s and above are kind of all pro caliber. 60s and 70s are average players. And then the person says Biadasz and Gates, so your former center, your new center, are almost the same. Biadasz rates 14th out of 37 centers. Gates rates 16th. Larson's listed 33rd. In pass protection, Biadasz has a 63.4 grade. Gates is 61.4. Larson is 28.7. In run blocking, Biadasz is 68.1. Gates is 70.9. Larson is 60.9 overall. Biadasz is 68.6. Gates is 66.1. Larson is 50.3. Whoever the quarterback is, I don't want to see our center being pushed back into the quarterback. So this is kind of like how much of an improvement is Tyler Biadasz over Nick Gates and Tyler Larson, because Tyler Biadasz is one of the guys who's gotten a multi-year deal from the Washington Commanders. So you feel like he's basically being penciled in as a starter here in the organization. And I think certainly it's fair to say that he's being penciled in as a starter, but any good coaching staff, any true, honest coaching staff is going to make everything in competition. If Ricky Stromberg comes out in camp and just blows the pants off of Tyler Biadasz and proves that he's the guy for the job, then hopefully this staff will have the, I don't know what you want to call it, integrity, ethics, whatever you want to call it, intestinal fortitude to make the young man the starter. But I think when you look at the grades, so here's the thing about grades that, rabid supporters of the PFF grading system are not going to like me saying this, right? But the first question you have to ask yourself when you're truly grading an offensive line is, what was the call? What was the adjustment? What were we looking at? And unless you know what their calls were, unless you know what their adjustments were, and sometimes at the snap of the ball, you can kind of tell, right? So if your right tackle goes right, for example, and the rest of your line goes left, pretty good chance your right tackle is off, right? Pretty good chance your right tackle was the one who was wrong. Not likely that the 4 dudes that went left were right, and the 1 dude that went right was wrong. Just kind of an example as far as that's concerned. The other part of that is when we have correct shifts, when we have correct blitz pickups, when we have correct adjustments, how much of that is quarterback, how much of that is the center, how much of it is on the quarterback, how much is on the center in the first place, right? So some teams have the center calling the shifts, the adjustments, the mic, they do all that stuff. Jason Kelce, one of the best in the league, unfortunately playing for the Philadelphia Eagles, was really well known for that, right? But one of the problems the Philadelphia Eagles had down the stretch, it looked like when you watch the tape of the Philadelphia Eagles, is that Jason Kelce would call out a mic, he would call out a shift, he would call out whatever, and the line would do one thing, and Jalen Hurts basically would do something completely different. It really looked like Jalen Hurts lost faith or trust either in Jason or in that line in general, and it really started messing things up to where they're blocking down one way, letting a free rusher come from this side, and Jalen Hurts is running right into the free rusher because he's going the opposite direction of the check. So they're either not seeing the same thing, they're not hearing the same thing, they're not reading the checks the same way, whatever it is. So that is a big part of it, right? Why was Nick Gates benched in the first place? Certainly you turn on the film and you see a guy bowl him over, you see him lay on a block, and you're kind of like, that's why he was benched. And certainly was part of it, right? Absolutely was part of it. But the other part of it could have been that when he's calling shifts or he's calling checks, they're wrong. He's not seeing it correctly. He's not reading it correctly. He's not responding the way the coaches want him to. And it's leading to blown blocks from other areas, is leading to bad protection from other areas, and it's leading to your young quarterback getting beat up even more than he actually should, potentially. Now, the bottom line is, and the truth is, I don't know that for sure, and I don't know how much. I can't tell you like 70% of it was the calls, 30% of it was the physicality and the actual physical play of the game. I can't tell you how much of it was his attitude in the workroom. I can't tell you how much of it was attitude on the practice. Like, there's a lot of layers to this kind of stuff. So the PFF grades certainly valuable. And I think when you're looking at it, is it fair to say that physically Biotish and Gates and Larson are very similar type players? I think that's fair to say. I think Biotish and Gates are probably similar level centers. And I think that if both were free agents last year, you would have seen them both get similar levels of interest and similar deals. But what I think this staff is kind of banking on is, we know Tyler Biotish, the leader. We know Tyler Biotish, the communicator. And we know I expect Tyler Biotish to be in control of the checks and the mic calls and all that stuff early on, at least, if not for the entire first season with a rookie quarterback. I think that's why he was brought in. I think that's what this coaching staff knows about him. And we'll see. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you right now that it's very interesting, but simply putting your line in the right place, which is part coaching, but also on the field, is that whoever's setting those protections, simply putting them in the right place will do wonders for an offensive line protecting your quarterback or blocking for runs, even if they're not as physically dominant as you might look. Again, you look at Andrew Wiley, right? Comes from a Super Bowl winning offensive line, comes to Washington, and a lot of you have pointed out, doesn't really look like a Super Bowl caliber right tackle. Well, again, how much of that is purely Andrew, and how much of that is Andrew trying to work within the framework of calls and adjustments that aren't being set right? Again, I can't tell you that specifically, but I will just tell you that talking to people about offensive line play, a lot, we see a guy hit a block, we see a guy hit a gap or something, and sometimes we see a guy completely leave a guy wide open. We go, what are you doing? How could you possibly do that? People will tell you that there is a reason that guy did that. It's not that he forgot to block, something. He just doesn't see this like 300-pound dude lined up across from him. And oftentimes it's either bad communication or miscommunication. Who's communicating? That's the important part. I think that's why Tyler Biotish is here, is because they brought him in here for his level of communication, which again will hopefully be very, very solid. So hopefully that's the best way I can answer that. But I do like your breakdown of PFF grades as far as like 60s are solid players, 70s are like solid to above solid, right? 80s are like Pro Bowl caliber, 90s are all pro caliber type of player. So great mailbag, guys. I know it's Monday. Usually we do mock draft Monday, but I wanted to hit another mailbag. You guys sent in a lot of great questions, so I wanted to hit some of those. Again, we're in Orlando, Florida on Monday. The NFL league meetings are. We got 10 rule changes being considered. We're also going to talk to Dan Quinn. We're going to talk to Adam Peters. You never know what other owners, GMs, coaches are going to be wandering around. We might talk to. I already got a buddy of mine, Daniel Flick, over at the Falcon site for SI.com's FanNation. He's going to ask Raheem Morris about Dan Quinn. I'm going to ask Dan Quinn about Raheem Morris. Those two guys know each other very well. They're going to see each other this season. Both of them are new head coaches this season. So very interested to hear what they have to say, along with many, many others. So come back this week. We'll be doing this most of the week from Orlando. I will be traveling back to Virginia Thursday. So your Friday episode will probably be coming to you from a hotel in North Carolina. But until that time comes, if you got questions or comments, throw them in the YouTube comment section or become a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders and text me today. Don't forget, check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live stream sports channel on YouTube. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every days. Thank you for coming through like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.